Hi everyone and welcome to Isamu Rat Care. Right, so today I'm going to do a video that's all about homing and more importantly homing age for rats. And I want to do this for both breeders because it's very important as breeders we understand what the right time to home rats is, and also as kind of pet homes because it's very important that we understand what age to take rats on from breeders as well. In some places, and it's something I'm seeing increasingly, you'll get breeders who either lie about the age of the kittens, and you can genuinely see that quite a lot, or breeders that don't actually care that much and will still home very young, and some actually that are just not informed and don't understand the impact potentially of homing underage kittens. So I really want to explain why there is a minimum age to homing and actually what a good age to home is, and then for those of you that are kind of looking to get pets, how you kind of properly assess the age of the kittens involved. So for this, I've roped in two of my Wooby babies. Woobies is because the mum was Wick and the dad is Bobby, but I'm quite known for my ability to misspell anything. And I got a nice autocorrect where Bobby's name was rewritten to Boobies, so he's sometimes known as Boobies now, hence the Wooby litter. So we've got a little boy here and a little girl, just to demonstrate actually, because I thought it would be useful. So I have to remove them from my neck. They're getting quite cosy there. They've gone sleepy on me. Right, so this is to demonstrate how easy rats are to sex at this age. Right, one of these rats has testicles, one of them doesn't. The other actually really key thing is, because sometimes you can't see the testicles, you see this little lady here, she's got like a little dark bit underneath there. Now that is her vagina. Currently, and you probably can't see it that well, it's sealed shut. So in the next half a week, maybe 2 weeks, it will open up, and that basically means she can now be mated and in theory get pregnant and have babies. She's currently 5 weeks old, so she's going to be doing that. As tend to do it around about the 6 week mark, so we normally split around 5 to 5.5 weeks. In fact, I'll be splitting the sexes tomorrow, so I could do it a little bit longer, but it's just kind of convenient, and mum's more than ready to go back to the group. And actually the babies are kind of really quite solid and chunky. So I've just weighed these as well, and I want to give you a bit of an idea. At 5 weeks old, these, and they're a reasonably chunky litter, they're by no means small. They're not the biggest I've ever had, but they're towards the bigger end. So she's just over 100 grams, about 109 grams, and he's 130 grams, he's a chunky man. And that's quite useful because it gives you an idea of kind of, when I'm kind of touching them and feeling them, they feel nice and solid, they feel substantial, but they're still 5 week old babies. So they're still, whilst they're eating mostly dry food and the occasional wet meal that I give them and their mum, they are still actively, occasionally feeding off mum. And that is quite a kind of like, it's more of a comfort thing at this age. It's not that they need it anymore, it's that they kind of actively get comfort from feeding from mum, and mum quite likes doing it too. Well, I say that, Wick's a little bit fed up now, but she lets them because she loves them, bless her. But yeah, so they're still feeding off mum, and that's important because one of the reasons we need to be careful about when we home babies is because of their immune system. So when they're feeding off mum, they basically, as well as the kind of nutrition and the kind of comfort and the warmth factors of feeding, they also get to take advantage of mum's immune system. So mum basically is supplementing their immune system and giving them lots of kind of the antibodies that she's developed over her year of life. In fact, it was her year-old birthday a couple of days ago. So she's basically acting as their immune system by feeding them. So when I take Wick off them, all of a sudden their immune system is going to start going for the first time, and that is quite a substantial thing. It's entirely down to them then. So what we need to do in that time, we need to try and keep things as stable for them as possible. We need to minimise their chances of being exposed to kind of new bacteria, new viruses, basically anything that will push their immune system, because it's only just started. And because of that, it's going to be weaker than normal. It takes a little bit of time, just picking up very small minor things for it to build up to get exercised effectively. Just like if you're running a race, you don't take on a kind of a marathon straight away, you start off doing little bits and pieces. So we want to give them a little bit of time for their immune system to just get used to the normal kind of bacteria, bits and bobs that they've kind of grown up around. And they'll have a little bit of lingering kind of backup from mum's milk for that for while they kind of learn to deal with it. So that's something that you really need to take into account when deciding when to home to them. The other thing Sorry, I'm now having my hair groomed and my ear groomed. Thank you, Lumi. Oh no, you're Mr. Red, aren't you? Yes, so the other thing that's really important is social development. So these little guys have only ever lived with their mum and each other. So they're quite young. They've always had mum there as a kind of backup. 5 weeks old of life, and they are like acting as proper rats now. They're interested in the world. They sometimes free range with some of my trusted adults, so they are used to other rats existing too. But they are still very sheltered, and they're still very reliant on mum, just for that kind of confidence and comfort that she gives. So it's quite important as well that we give them time to kind of learn to be, like, get their own self-confidence without mum there. So this is partly why I actually always take mum off, even off the does, unless I had some particular reason, like the does were skinny. I would rather them get used to being without mum for at least a couple of weeks before I home them, because I don't want them to kind of go from having their mum always there and being their kind of major confidence factor to all of a sudden no mum, having to face the world, a new home, a new stressful environment, sometimes introductions, though I wouldn't introduce them that early personally, but it's quite a lot to go through when they've only just been split from their mum. So the next kind of couple of weeks, and I will say I tend to home about 7 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks, it really does depend. In the kind of the quite kind of harsh lockdown we had at the start of the year, 11 weeks, or no, 12 I think it was, 12 weeks. It was getting very, very close to becoming difficult for book intros. It worked out though, got away with it just about. Are you going to sleep on me? Yes, so at this age, 5 weeks old, they've never been away from mum, they've never had to have their immune system run, and they've only ever been in this place. So the next couple of weeks are really important from a social development point of view. Like I say, they learn to be themselves, they learn to get their own kind of level of self-confidence, and it's important they do that in a safe space, without too much stress on their immune system, and with kind of company around them. So that's kind of quite important to me. What I do sometimes do, and it's something that is slightly different than kind of rehoming, and I do want to mention this, is if you've got small litters, or like you've only got one of one sex, then it can be useful to merge with another breeder's litter. Now this is quite different from going to a pet home, because in another breeder's house they will be surrounded by other kittens in a very safe space, and often actually also in a very similar kind of bacteria load. Most people's rat rooms are quite similar, particularly at the moment if you're kind of taking them to another breeder that's got plenty of kittens. They've not been to shows recently that you haven't been to, which is none at the moment because the shows aren't on, then that can be quite a good thing. So I've got one girl in this litter, this little lady, Lumi. She will be coming back to me one day, but she will need company, so I'm going to have to do something with her. But the best thing I can do is find a nice big group of kittens, which I found. She's going tomorrow to live with some, and that'll be lots and lots of kind of extra company and socialisation in still a very protected environment. So in a kind of big rat room like this, the place smells of rats. As much as my soil does actually massively cut it down, to a rat that has a far better nose than me, it still smells of rats. It's quite a safe place. She'll be going to stay with Lovecraft. So Lovecraft's rat room, weirdly enough, smells of rats, and actually they're all related to mine, so they smell very similar. So it's kind of like quite and actually they all have very similar stuff. We do have quite a kind of interchange of rats. They're family, really. But yes, so in some situations you have to think about that. But when you're talking about going to a pet home, you're talking about going in groups of 2s or 3s normally, sometimes 4s. And larger groups, but really the 2s and 3s are the main problem, because they're going with a much smaller group. So these are only kind of like a 5, but they've been used to a 5+ mum for their whole lives. So by us kind of like putting them in a group with just, sorry, they're very cute at the moment, I'm getting distracted, just with their kind of siblings or cousins in the case of the Lovecraft rats, with lots of babies to play in, that gives them lots of time to learn kind of social skills. It's a bit like how you take puppies to puppy training classes. We don't have rat training classes, weirdly enough. Maybe we should. A lot of it's about socialisation, a bit like play school for kids, similar principle. Having their siblings around them helps them play properly. So playing properly involves sometimes dragging your brother or sister around by the tail, which I don't think it was you that did it, but somebody was definitely dragging another baby around by the tail recently. It means learning to fight. That sounds awful, but play fighting is actually really important to baby development, which is why making sure that they have, when they do eventually get home, they have similar age company is just so important. A baby rat can't properly play fight with an adult. An adult takes it too seriously, and even if they don't take it seriously, they're just not physically the right size to properly play fight with. They're big and chunky, and you can't pin them or hump them or leap on their heads. Well, they sometimes leap on their heads still. So whilst they can live with older rats, they do still need that young playmate. But that's talking about around the 7 weeks, 8 weeks max when they're ready for homing. At the moment, almost the more place and playmates you can give them, sometimes the better, though it does become hard from a human point of view in socialising them properly. But, rats like this, they don't need a lot of socialising, really. As much as I enjoy it and actively enjoy doing it, if they've been bred well and they get regular handling, all the stuff I do is just bonus. And mostly for my enjoyment, isn't it? Yes, miss. Right, so 5 weeks old. So we've talked about why 5 weeks old isn't an appropriate age. They need this period of time, and I will say the minimum for the NFRS, which is the national club in the UK, is 6 weeks. I'm a bit like, I wouldn't be happy homing my lines at 6 weeks, and that's because they're not mature enough. So at the moment, you'd probably just be able to see they're still quite fluffy, and this is quite important for later. This is the kitten coat. They've actually started, and I can feel it underneath to get their adult coat through, but they're in this kind of still very fluffy and super cute phase, and the kitten coat is kind of like still there. That means they're still babies, and it's a really important thing for me. I would expect the majority of rats by homing age to be well into their adult coat. That's kind of important as well, because when they're doing that really big molt and it's their first proper molt, they actually need quite a lot of extra nutrition, so you do want to kind of make sure that you're feeding them appropriately for that age. But yes, so fluffy kitten coat, and you can see it more if I kind of like poof it up slightly against my top. It's probably not the best. So they're in the fluffy kitten coat. They're still quite babyish. You can see head proportion to the body, so this is a good way of kind of like judging their age. So they've still got quite a large head to the body, and these are by no means small rats, but this is quite typical for my line 5 weeks old. And I tend to judge kind of what a decent homing age is off them physically, really. They may feel substantial, but I know in 2 weeks' time they're going to be much longer rats. They're going to have a shiny adult coat. They're going to have a much more mature head, and that feels about the right kind of age for my lot. Sometimes I go 8 weeks as well. Oh, I've just thought, yeah, this is typical of me planning these well in advance. The other thing that's really important about the 5 to 6 week mark, and people at home at 5 weeks, or actually younger even, rats go through something called a fear period, and actually everything does. It's that point in life where something turns from a kind of childish, nothing can hurt me type thing, through to, oh my god, everything could hurt me. And that kind of realisation, it's actually been really well studied in dogs, the kind of puppy fear period, which I think is a bit older, probably about 7 or 8 weeks, something like that. I don't know exactly, I'm not a dog breeder, so I don't really memorise those numbers, but I have read through it because it's quite interesting, and there's a lot of relations with rats. But it's something, speak to any kind of experienced breeder, and they will notice that they go through this period. And mine is about 5 to 6 weeks. And actually most of the breeders we spoke to thought it was 5 to 6 weeks, though some notice a kind of slightly earlier one around about the 3 week mark, and some notice a slightly later one as well, like a second, around the 10 to 11 week mark. So it's quite interesting. Different lines will do different things, but almost every rat breeder has noticed this kind of 5 to 6 week mark thing. And that is when, like, even the slightest thing seems to freak them out, and you're convinced you've broken your babies, and genuinely you haven't. They're just going through the fear period. They're just very reactive to sound. They can be freaked out by new people visiting, new smells. Basically anything that they've not been exposed to in their young lives suddenly seems terrifying, and they don't really know what to do, so they just freak out and dart somewhere and hide and huddle there staring at you with big eyes, big sad eyes. So these are about ready to go into that in the next few days. I'll probably see that. It can also be worse for the does, because around about 6 weeks they get the first heat, and if you combine the first heat with a slightly later fear period, like any time you touch them they think they're being murdered, which is a bit of a nightmare. You giving me a bath? That's very sweet, thank you. Poor things are like bored out of their mind here. They want to be playing, they can't because I'm not letting them onto the work surface, so they're just going to sleep. But it makes for super cute video. Yes, babes. Yes, so fear period is another reason why homing around the 5-week mark is bad. And the reason I'm stressing this is because I'm seeing more and more, and I'm seeing it a lot, rats being homed at 5 weeks, sometimes, and actually quite often in the UK, the breeder will claim they're 8 weeks old, because 8 weeks is apparently the only age you can name kittens. Like, I'm clearly doing them at 7 weeks quite often, so I'm not meeting that. But I will say 8 weeks is quite a good age to home them at, and I think it works for probably the vast majority of lines will be more than ready then. Some will be ready a little bit earlier, some will be ready at 6 weeks. I'd say there's not many lines I've seen that have been kind of maturing well enough at that age, but 6 weeks is feasible, 5 weeks is not, because even if they're physically ready, you need that little bit of gap from their immune system from losing their mum. But yes, so we're seeing more and more people claiming that their rats are older so that people will take them, because people thankfully have started to get the message that homing at 5 weeks is wrong. It's not fair on the babies, let's say. So they go to the breeders, and the breeders say, oh no, they're 8 weeks old, and actually they probably, if anything, look a little bit younger than these guys, which is why I thought it was important to start doing this video now, so you can see what a 5-week-old rat looks like. And I will say, if anything, these are slightly mature for that age, because they were quite a small litter, there was only 5 of them, so they may look even more babyish than this. The other thing that's even more worrying is it's not just 5 weeks. I've seen quite a few rats recently being homed at 3 weeks. At 3 weeks old, they're like little balls of fluff. They're incredibly cute, but they've basically, at 3 weeks old, you can wean them, but they're still, by choice, drinking a lot of mum's milk. And they're quite reliant on it. It's not like this is quite a natural wean, really. What they are drinking is kind of bits and pieces now. It's nothing really, it's just for the sake of it. Whereas at 3 weeks, then still actively feeding. If you kind of like let them free wean effectively, which is what we do by the 5-week mark, then they will transition normally onto solids around about 4 weeks as the majority of the diet. Before that, they're normally mostly on milk, but picking at solids. And that basically kind of like, so to break it off so early at 3 weeks old, they'll be very much in their kind of kitten coat, but more than that, around about the 3-week mark, you find that a lot of babies go through what I call the chicken phase, which is when the big growth spurts hit, and they can go from being like really solid, compact little babies to suddenly stretching out and going bony and skinny and fluffy, which is hence the chicken phase. And they feel very lightweight in your hands, and they just need lots of extra nutrition then. And going through that with mum's milk for support really helps, as does with a good feeding regime. If they're homed at that age, it can cause permanent damage to them, kind of stunting growth and causing issues. Not to mention their immune system has gone from full mum milk to no mum milk to new home when they're underage to going through the full fear period in that period, on sometimes homed on their own, thankfully not often. Quite often, sadly, missexed, so make sure you paid attention to the bit before. And I will say you can sex a 3-week-old baby just as easily as that. It is quite obvious at that age. But yes, so this really is make sure you're aware of why we say home 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. Make sure that you're looking for those markers in the rats. So you're looking for maturity. You're looking for kind of, in fact, I'll describe what you're looking for in 2 weeks' time when I finish this video off, and we'll show you these guys, or more accurately, maybe 1 or 2 of them with some new friends. We'll have our kitten picking party around 7 weeks old, but like homing age, you'll get a feel for how much more mature they look than they do now, and that should help you both in looking for that if you're a breeder in your own rats. And I will say, you don't have to do 8 weeks, you don't have to do 9 weeks, you don't have to do 7 weeks, you don't have to do 6 weeks. Give them a decent amount of time to recover from being separated from mum. Make sure that you're not weaning them too early, because it's not really fair on them in terms of growing physically well. I mean, there are exceptional situations, like if you've got an accidental litter. Sorry, did I wake you up? Sorry, miss. Yeah, if you've got an accidental litter and the mum is pregnant again, which can happen, mum was able to get pregnant immediately after giving birth, so if she was left in with dad, you can find that there's another litter 3 or 4 weeks later, delayed implantation on the 4-week thing. I should do a video on accidental pregnancies actually, that's one I've been meaning to do for a bit. But yes, so there can be situations where you have to wean early. I've seen situations where a mum has got really, really ill and basically you have to move the rats over. It does affect them, but when you've got no choice, then that's what you have to do, you know. And you can give them plenty of nutritional support to minimise the impact. But you wouldn't then go and home them at that age because they need a lot of extra support, a lot of extra kind of comfort. But yes, so understand what we're looking for in a kind of mature, ready to home rat. Understand what they physically look like. Don't believe everything somebody tells you. You know, read into it yourself. You don't want a kitten that looks very kitteny, fluffy coat, small head. You know, one that kind of will fit in the palm of your hand. The kind of 100-gram thing. By the time they're ready to home, they're probably going to be more towards the 200-gram mark, but 150 to 200. But weight is not the best kind of judge in the world. However, it is useful. I remember somebody online recently who'd been homed 2 8-week rats that were a buck and a doe when he meant to be getting, I think it was 2 bucks, and they were physically, I think they were 86 grams at 8 weeks. They were 3 weeks, having looked at them at most, maybe 4 actually. But they're around that kind of period. They're all fluff balls, very, very cute. You can see the appeal, but that person had been lied to, and it's quite apparent. I think they went in with a group of 4-week-old kittens with another breeder to kind of give them company and to look after them. And actually that extra milk made a massive difference. I will say, early weaning, so if you kind of have to wean around 3 weeks, they're likely to develop slower. And I've also seen some kind of rescue litters where even at like 8 weeks, they're still physically quite like young, and that can be because the mum hasn't had adequate nutrition when she's been feeding them early on. So these are, like I say, they are quite mature for their age. So you do have to take that a little bit into account, but I would still seriously question anybody that's kind of selling little balls of fluff with giant heads and kind of look younger than these guys, and claiming that they're 7-8 weeks or older. And I would not be kind of supporting somebody that does that unless you really, really know that kitten has definitely been born over 8 weeks ago. And it's quite difficult to tell those things sometimes. But anyway, I've talked for far too long about this already, so I'll come back to it when these guys are a little bit older and give you a bit of an update and show you the difference in kind of physical age, which might be useful. And we'll take it from there. So over and out from me, and over and out from the Woobies. Hi everyone, so I'm just going to continue the video all about homing age. So where we've got to now, we have a bunch of babies now that are 7 weeks old, and they're kind of like playing around in the background. There is some boy babies. There is also Twizzles out there with them. So Twizzel is a spayed doe, as we've discussed before, but I thought I'd do her grand weigh-in later on, and we'll see how she gets on. Alright, so the boys have actually literally just come back here. We ended up sending the boys across to Lovecraft and the girls stayed here, and they've been kind of like raising in their kind of groups for the past couple of weeks since the last time I filmed a video, and getting on very well, and they've matured quite a lot. So I will say the boys are a little bit, it's the first time they've been on this free range area. For the boys that were born here, they've obviously been on here before. The other boys, it's the first time they've ever been on here. So I shall grab one and I will kind of show you the difference in maturity so that you can see kind of how much growth they've done in those 2 weeks, and also kind of like you can get a feel for the kind of maturity. Right, you look like a good choice. Got ya. Right, so this is one of the lads bred here. So this is the guy that I fondly called, oh no you're not, this is the little buff. There is a hunky buff somewhere on there as well. Now you'll see at the moment that compared to last time, the proportion of his head to his body has completely changed. So he's much more like normal rat shaped now, and he's kind of much longer, sleeker. His coat, if you can see it, is much more mature. It's a lot smoother. It sits very smoothly on it. This is an adult coat. He's bigger as well. He will weigh significantly more than he did last time, and he's just generally kind of more rat shaped, and that's quite a big difference. And that difference matters because it shows that he's physically a lot more mature and a lot more ready for change. He's a lot kind of like more adult in everything, even though he's still a kitten and he will still play like a kitten, and that's still important for him to do, which is why we home him with other kittens. So he's going to go to a home with one of the black Dumbos that are wandering around somewhere. Wait, this, I'm sure that's quite a good idea. Let's grab one. So this litter, my litter, are slightly more physically mature than this litter, which is one of the Lovecraft litters. So this is one of the little black Dumbos from her litter. But you'll notice again, whilst his head to body ratio, his head is slightly bigger than my little buff lad, it's still quite a lot more mature than we saw last time, and physically his body is also long. You can also really see his sleek adult coat hair, so you see that shine as he's moving around. It doesn't show up as well as on kind of pale colours, but it is definitely there and very apparent on the black. So you can see generally also from the head shape, the head's got a decent length to it, and that's a sign of physical maturity as well. Oh, he's off. What are you up to, mister? But yes, that level of physical maturity just shows that they've kind of grown up. At this age, they are basically ready for homing. Could hold on for them for another week, some breeders do. This lot are pretty much ready to go because they've reached that kind of physical, they just feel properly solid in the hand. They've got substance to them, they've got presence, and they're actually very kind of calm and interested in what they're doing, and just generally a lot better. They've coped with this move very, very quickly and very well. How about you, misters? They're mobbing poor Twizzel at the moment. If you see a large black rat being mobbed by lots of little rats, that's poor Twizzel, who's kind of like, get these babies off me. They do, I should say, both Twizzel and most of my adults actually do regularly free range with the baby girls, so she's quite used to babies recently. But the boys are not used to free ranging with adult girls. Come here, Twiz. Let's say hello to the camera. And here's Twiz. But yes, so it's very much, it is very important, and I talked a lot about why last time, but why it's important to get this level of maturity. Here's another example. This is a buff Dumbo. So again, you can see this litter, the Dumbo litter, are slightly behind in terms of physical maturity, but you can't really miss that long head. A kitten will generally have a short, cuddlier, fluffier head, and again his coat is very sleek and adult coat like, even though he's not physically quite as long as my litter. I must say that litter are just like, I think they're about a couple of days, oh no, they're a day younger than mine, and we do have one from a day older litter, but actually he's probably similar maturity to mine. So you see 3 different litters there, and they're different kind of physical maturity. There's not much in it. All of them are virtually the same age. All of them are 7 weeks currently, and they're looking good and pretty much ready for homing, which is good. They'll be going over the next kind of weekish. Various people coming to pick them up, or more accurately, socially distanced handover, which is, it's one of those things that's a little bit sad. I normally spend about I don't know, half an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes depending how talkative people are and how much they need to get away. Just introducing them to the various family members that are in the room, talking about handling, taking them through. We give a kitten pack with all of our babies. Since we're on homing, I will briefly introduce you to one of those. So it's got things like bag of Back to Nature. If you're in the UK, Back to Nature do this brilliant scheme where as a breeder they give you loads of sample packs and you can give them away for free. So it doesn't cost you anything, but it's really good for the pet homes to have stuff like that. Got little bags with treats in them, paper bags, so you can kind of throw the bags in with the rats as well. This one's just full of hay. It's surprising how much the rats like this kind of thing. You're interested, aren't you? These, which are cornstarch packing peanuts. It's important to say cornstarch. If they dissolve in water, they're very much loved as a treat, and they're quite nice. We have a millet spray in there. We have a bag of dry mix, so we like to send them with a bit of an example of what they've always been fed on. Got a wet meal, so this is a type of like natural dog food that goes down very well, and it's good as extra protein. And on that subject, we also have a bag of soakable mix, which is again high protein thing. There's a lot of like bird egg food and a bit of Vitalin, which is a form of kind of soakable dog muesli that's relatively high in protein. And I think this is made up by Lisa, so I'm making this, well, not making it up, we tend to put exactly the same stuff in. A bit of kind of rusk in there as well, the rusk goes down quite well. And then just little things like popsicle sticks, lolly sticks. No, that's the babies, that's going to somebody else, which Twizzel is demonstrating. They just like to kind of like interact with. Cuttlefish bone, great source of calcium. They sometimes quite like chewing those. Wine bottle cork, they go down very well, they get destroyed very quickly. So it's like nothing in there is particularly expensive, because let's face it, we don't charge an awful lot for the rats. We make a loss on every litter, but it's quite a nice thing to have this kind of thing when you kind of like get your new rats home and you've got like loads of little interesting treats that you can try out and such. I know when I used to kind of get when I was a pet home before I was a breeder, I used to absolutely love them. It used to mean a lot to me. We used to print out and put in like family trees and like care information. We send that by email now. Saves the planet, and we're both. Lisa's very good at remembering to print these things out. I'm very bad at it. So actually it works out quite well doing it this way, and we know that the owners definitely got it then. And they've got a record and they can't lose it, and the rats can't pee on it or eat it, which they do. But yeah, so that works very, very well. So that's the kind of thing we do homing. The other thing we do in these times, you've got to think about how to home rats out, bearing in mind that like until last week, the UK was in lockdown. This week, both me and Lisa live in tier 3 areas, which means that we can't have people indoors. And we actually also can't have people in our gardens because that's classed as a private space. So instead what we do is basically on the street effectively, we do a handover with carriers. So the owner will put the carrier down, having it opened. Beforehand, I will kind of fully wash my hands, use an antibacterial wipe over the rats to make sure they're as good as possible. They'll go into a clean carrier. And then I will literally, when I go out there, I'll bring the rats out in a carrier, pick them up, put them into the carrier, close it, and then it's ready to go home. Oh, they're bothering me too much, Twiz. Yeah, so then they're ready to basically go home with their owner. It is a bit different than normal, a lot different than normal, but we do a lot of chat beforehand, and that's something that's quite important. So typically we'll see if the owners have got any questions beforehand. Afterwards we're always on kind of messenger, social media, email, and make sure that they know that we're there. We'll hopefully check up on people as well to make sure they're getting on okay a few days after they've got home, if we've not spoken to them beforehand. Usually we've spoken to them beforehand. So it's not quite the same, but it's what you have to do when you're kind of in coronavirus world as it is. But yes, so that's probably the main thing. What we would also normally do in normal situations, which we can't do now, is we sometimes start off introductions for people, and that does tend to go down very well. But yes, we will kind of see how that goes really. It's working for now, and hopefully next year we'll get back to something more normal. What I did manage to do over the summer, when kind of things were a little bit more down, I could get people into the rat room, though we're all wearing face masks and such, but that was at least nice, because then I could kind of introduce them a little bit more to the family and show them how to handle their babies. If you're new to rats, that can be quite stressful at first. But yes, so that's something to consider. So I've looked a little bit at homing. I've tried to explain why it's important that they are a bit older. All these things about trying to make sure that their immune system is kind of up and running properly, and how stopping weaning is kind of like the real crunch date on that one, when it really starts to get up and running. Also about social development. So these have had an extra 2 weeks to play together, and play is massively important to their kind of lifelong social skills. And whilst we would always be homing them in pairs or trios, even better trios if you've got if you've not already got rats, because same age playmates are so important for social development. It's not just good enough that somebody has adults and adds a single baby, and intros are harsh on them when they're on their own as well. But yes, that idea that social play for that with a larger group of babies makes much more of a difference than let's say just homing them into when they've got all that stress, and they like getting that big whack of stress in the fear period as well. We spoke a little bit about fear period. These definitely did go through it. It was shortly after I did that video, probably about half a week after I did that video. It was actually over pretty quickly this time. It was over in about half a week. Babe, what are you doing? Oh, they've got on the shelf. The shelf that has all my supplements on. That's why you went all quiet, isn't it? But yes, so sorry, turning the tumble dryer on, which sings to you. If you've not heard it before in my videos, I do this quite regularly. But yes, so that's quite an important thing to take into account. And homing 6 weeks minimum. 7 weeks is my personal comfortable minimum for my line, just to do with the age, they kind of like develop at, that kind of thing. But we would home later if any of them needed it. This lot don't. Sometimes you have like a really large litter that has just got a little bit behind, or actually when we've had a foster rescue litter here, we've homed them more like normally 9 or 10 weeks because they're quite often tiny. Usually it's kind of a situation where a mum's been a baby herself, been missexed by a pet shop, or a less great breeder, let's say. Then so the mum's quite young herself, so she doesn't have a lot of nutrition, so the babies do suffer for it. Even if you feed mum loads and loads and loads, and it's the best you can do, it does kind of set the babies back a little bit. But yes, but they get there in the end, and they make lovely pets and everything. Right, so I've been putting this off for a bit. We shall do Twizzle's weigh-in. So I will just stop this while I get the kind of the thing to weigh her in and get that set up and move the camera around, and then we will see. For those of you that don't know why I'm talking about Twizzle's weigh-in, my last video was all about dieting a chubby rat. It's been just over a week now, and poor little Twizzle has had diet rations since her birthday, bless her. I was mean, didn't I, and gave you a mean birthday present. But it's definitely starting, she feels different. She does feel like she's lost weight. She actually feels like she's lost it a little bit too fast. What I've been doing, and I should mention that, is every other day it's been fairly normal. I fed them a little bit less than they would normally get, but I've got a couple of skinnies in that cage, so I didn't want to take too much off them. But then every other day, Twizzle gets put into a kind of second cage with a tiny bit of food, not very much at all, much less than her normal rations, and she just eats that. So the reason I've actually done this way, it's not what a way I've done before, but what I wanted to do was to try and make sure she kept that balanced diet. So every other day she's effectively been on very kind of like skinny meals effectively. Now what I'll probably do is, rather than doing it every other day, I'm going to move that to every third day and see if that's better, because I do feel like she's lost it a little bit fast. She's just lost a little bit of body condition as well, and I don't want her to do that. I want her to stay fit and lose it gradually. She's actually feeling, if I'm honest, pretty much the right weight now as well, but I don't want her to put it back on again. But we shall see, so we'll give her that weigh, and then we will see how you've done, miss. Right, let's pause this a sec. Right, we're on the moment of truth. The baby boys are really keen to help. This could try and skew the results. If I get Twizzle plus a baby rat, that will make her look like she's fat when she really isn't right now. So for memory's sake, she was 426 last time. She is now 396 grams. So me mentioning that I feel like she's lost a little bit fast. She's lost 30 grams in what is effectively probably about 10 days. So that is a little fast. I like 10 to 20 grams, which is why I've kind of slowed things down a bit. However, this also goes with the fact that I feel she's probably about the right weight now. I'll demonstrate the kind of difference here. So if I hold her there, oh, this way, bless her, she's a good rat, isn't she? You'll notice now that she's a lot less kind of peared shape. She looks a bit like a long tube, and that's what we're aiming for with Twiz. Babies never film with animals. They always they're quite amusing. Yes, you don't get fat, otherwise you'll have to go on a diet. Yes, so Twizzel now is much better. So what I now need to do is keep this weight off her, and I need to help her kind of get back into physical condition a little bit. So that's where I'm going to kind of like slightly tweak this result a little bit, or this method, because it's worked well for her. And it's actually, what I find with dieting rats is you have to find the thing that works for the rat, and because not everything does. But as you can see, she still loves me despite me being horrible to her, not giving her as much food. She's a good girl. Right, so on that, I will say probably over and out from me and the babies and Twizzel, and hopefully that will be useful for you, particularly if you're considering homing age rats, and also if you're interested in the kind of Twizzle's weight loss journey. So bye from me, bye from Twizzel, and bye from assorted baby boys.